Welcome to this El Monitor Pro webinar on Israel's elections. I'm Andrew Parasoliti, president of El Monitor, and our guest today is El Monitor columnist Ben Caspit, who joins us from Tel Aviv. Ben is one of the most in-demand TV, radio, and print media personalities in Israel and author of the best-selling book, The Netanyahu Years. For our viewers, please submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A function on your Zoom screen. And Ben, let's get right into it. Tell us where things stand in Israel's electoral process. What happened November 1st? And are you starting a sequel to your book on Netanyahu?
It's my second book, and it will be the third sequel. But I guess it will end only after we will not be here anymore. But thank you for having me, Andrew. It's good to be here in this webinar of Al Monitor, and we are actually one day before the formal declaration of the results. I think Prime Minister Lapid will call the next Prime Minister and the ex-Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this evening to congratulate him. And I guess that within 2 to 4 weeks, the new government will form. It will be the most extreme and rightist government in Israel's history. The first time that there will be more Knesset members in this coalition, more religious Knesset members than non-religious Knesset members. Only 9 women in the coalition of 65, for example, the current coalition of 61 or 60 carries 30 women and 9 women ministers. And as Minister Avigdor Lieberman is saying all the time, nothing good is threatening us right now. The victory of Netanyahu is a landslide because it's 65 mandates. On the other side, 55 mandates, 50 to the Lapid bloc and 5 mandates to the Joint Arab Party. But in numbers, in popular vote, it's almost a draw. I think that Yair Lapid feels now like Hillary Clinton felt the other day, because if his bloc was more united, it could be totally different. It could be 60-60 or even 61, a victory of 61 to 51 to 59 to Lapid. But his inability to do in his bloc what Netanyahu did on the other side, and Netanyahu is the best, the master of all masters in politics, this is actually the failure.
Ben, what happened with the Arab parties this time around? Last time, Mansour Abbas, the Ram party, was instrumental in tipping the balance. What was the Arab turnout, and why didn't that happen, or why wasn't it impactful in this election?
Let's try to do it simple, because nothing is simple in Israeli politics. First, there was the joint party. All the Arab parties in one bloc, and this was good, and the peak was 15 mandates. We have 20% of Israeli population are Israeli Arabs, so they can have 24 mandates. They never did met this potential, and the peak was 15 when they were all together. Then Mansour Abbas quit, and he decided to be the Israeli Arab Anwar Sadat. I'm not dealing anymore with Palestinians, with the occupation. I'm dealing only with my people, with population. I want to be in coalition. I want to get a budget. I want to be involved and to influence, and it was a success. He got alone 4 mandates on the last time and went into the coalition. Historical moment. This was really something that whatever happens, this happened. Then the coalition collapsed, and we had another election right now. Mansour Abbas stayed alone, but the rest of the joint party, on the last moment before the deadline to bring all the lists of all the parties, they split to the Balad, very extremist party that is not recognizing Israel as a Jewish state, and the other party, which are, maybe you know the leaders, Ahmed Tibi, the famous, and Ayman Odeh, which is the Communist Party, etc. Now, this was the tragedy, because if one of these 2 parties is not meeting the override, the voter threshold of 3.25%. If you don't get 3.25% of the votes, you're out. It is 4 mandates approximately. Then the bloc loses, and this is exactly what happened. Lapid was not able to convince on these very dramatic last moments of September 15th, these three leaders to stay united. They split, and Balad lacked half of a percent in order to get in the Knesset. If Balad was meeting the voter threshold, and the Meretz party and Labor were joining forces, then it's 60-60. This is the tragedy.
Just a reminder to our viewers, you can submit your questions to Ben via the Q&A function on Zoom. Ben, we have a question. Will Netanyahu at one point drop Ben Gvir and take in the national camp? And tell us a little about Ben Gvir. As I understood from our own El Monitor reporting, even Netanyahu was wary of being seen with Ben Gvir up until the final weeks of the election campaign.
You can search Google, search the darknet, go to the KGB or Mossad. No one would find a picture, a joint picture of these two guys. In his most terrible nightmares, Netanyahu could not expect to form this kind of government. All Netanyahu governments were formed in the same formula. He was in the center, and he kept one or two parties on his left. And he is the founding father of the pragmatism. It was Labor, it was Barak, it was Tzipi Livni, it was Moshe Kachlon. Even Yair Lapid was the foreign minister of finance in the 2013 Netanyahu government. But now, Netanyahu is not a master of his own domain or wheels, because he needs all the extremists in order to pass the laws that will enable him to escape from the criminal court. Even today, testimonies in Netanyahu's court in Jerusalem. And this is a very interesting question, what will happen now to this criminal process. So will Netanyahu drop Ben Gvir and call in Gantz? I think when the question means national camp, this is the Gantz, Eisenkot, Gideon Sa'ar camp. I think we need two to tango, and here we don't have anyone to tango. Netanyahu cannot do it because he is a hostage of Ben Gvir, at least until he finishes the D9 approach to the Israeli judicial system, to fire the attorney general maybe, or a statute of, we call it the French law, that will drop the charges against him, or changing the criminal law, something. There are many ways he can just escape from justice. And for this, he needs Ben Gvir, he needs everyone, every vote. And on the other side, I spoke to Gantz and Lapid and Gideon Sa'ar and everybody today. They will not do it. When you do it, when you join with Netanyahu, you're doomed. History of Israeli politics, the graveyard of allies of Netanyahu is full. The last one was Benny Gantz. He believed the Netanyahu call, listen, we have the COVID-19, let's form a rotation government. And 5 minutes after this government was formed, he was stabbed metaphorically in the back, and then the whole black and blue and white party collapsed, and he hardly got 8 mandates on the last time, Benny Gantz. So he will not do it. Lapid will not do it, because Lapid's current 24, 25 mandates are just because he refused to that Netanyahu's offer. So I think in our cards, we don't see any unity government right now. We don't see any Ben Gvir out and Gantz in. And Itamar Ben Gvir, he was a follower of the late Rabbi Meir Kahane, a racist. He had a picture of Dr. Baruch Goldstein. It's a Jewish settler that killed dozens of Arabs when they prayed in Hebron, in the city of our founding fathers, many years ago. He claims that he was changed. He's not so extremist anymore, and I agree. But he is still very, very extremist. And I will not read the list of what he plans to do. It's not only security, it's not only assuring all the outposts in the West Bank, the unauthorized outposts, and the praying on Temple Mount, something that can ignite the whole Middle East, and hurting the LGBT community rights, not donating blood from gays anymore. A very long list, but he's a very, very smart guy. And his victory, 14 to 15 mandates, they got this party with the other guys, Bezalel Smotrich, that was interrogated by Shabak for terror. So these two guys, they have 14 mandates, and the party that contains two chief of staffs, Gadi Eisenkot and Benny Gantz, and Gideon Sa'ar, a rightist minister of justice, and another very, very good guy named Matan Kahane, that was a commander of F-16 squadron. They got only 12 points. So this is, in one sentence, the situation of Israeli politics right now.
Ben, we have a couple of questions.
Yes,
for our viewers, you can submit yours. We've got a long list already via the Q&A function on your Zoom platform. Ben, what does this government mean, assuming it comes together, for Netanyahu's court cases? And tell us a little background about the case and where it stands at this point.
He was charged in three cases. The worst one is bribery, and the two others are lighter, but today we hear testimonies from there that the case, the 1,000 case that he got presents and supplies from Arnon Milchan, an Israeli-American billionaire. You know the name from Hollywood. He's a huge guy in Hollywood. Hundreds of thousands of shekels of cigars and of champagne by demand, etc., etc. The situation of Netanyahu in the cases is not good. His machine is all his followers and his influence in the media helped him convince half of the Israeli public that it was all false and he's straight and nothing happened, etc. But he knows that his situation is not good. The most important question now is, will he really try to change Israeli judicial system? He can do it in three ways, and I touched it before. He can go for a statute of what we call the French statute, that you are not interrogating a prime minister, only after he finishes, and that automatically no trial, or try it in other ways. I'm not sure he'll go for it. He denied it all over the campaign. No, I'm not going to do it. And when his partners, Bezalel Smotrich and Ben Gvir, introduced their plan how to repair, to overhaul the judicial system, they said that they want to cancel one of the frauds, and this is exactly the fraud that he is blamed in. So I think it's very clear that there will be an attempt to do it. I'm not sure this attempt will be approved by Bagatz, by Israeli Supreme Court, but then the plan includes what we call an override clause, that the Knesset will be able to just overrule the Supreme Court. And this will be, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of Israeli democracy, because no checks and balances. Supreme Court cannot decide anymore anything about, and it's not just about the Knesset, about laws. It's about a criminal process that is in process. So I don't know if he's going all the way there, but I think he will try. And I think if he will, you're going to see a lot of mess in Israel. Huge demonstrations, what we saw before the last election. You know, we saw 10, 20, 30,000 people demonstrating in Jerusalem. I think we will see not in tens of thousands, in hundreds of thousands, and it can cause a lot of chaos. And I hope very much not to go there.
Ben, question on the Iran nuclear deal. You wrote about this for Monitor yesterday. What shift can we expect, if any, with regard to Israel's policy toward Iran, if he indeed puts a government together in the next few weeks? And would Israel consider a strike on Iran with Netanyahu in power?
My advice is don't be worried. Netanyahu is a hawk, but he's a coward. And if you remember, the guys in the Obama White House called him chicken shit. I don't follow this name, but I don't agree to this name. But Netanyahu had the opportunity to strike the nuclear infrastructure in Iran between 2010 and 2013. It was possible then, and he could do it, and he choked. Right now, Netanyahu is lucky. He is the luckiest politician in Israeli history, and he gets the Iranian issue, not only the deal, in the best shape that any prime minister got it in the last 20 years, because no deal on the table. It was almost there, as we both reported, Andrew, but right now, no deal on the table. Right now, nothing is happening, but Naftali Bennett, prime minister, when he was prime minister until 3 or 4 months ago, made a very, very dramatic change in Israeli policy. He calls it the octopus policy. And I want to remind you, for example, that a guy named, he was a general, Hassan Siad Khudai. He was a deputy commander of Unit 840 in the Republican Guards in Tehran, was killed in May. Foreign media said it was Israel. New York Times, there was a leak in the Times that Israel is very angry on the White House because of the leak, that it is us, but he was in charge of killing Israeli or hurting Israeli targets abroad, and he was killed in Tehran. And then was the huge mess in Turkey, if you remember, where all the Mossad was there in cooperation with the Turkish security forces, and it was almost there were many Iranian agents there, and it did not happen. It was a huge victory for the Mossad. And right now, as someone who knows told me today, this unit is not active. They prefer to leave. I mean LIVE. So Bennett and Lapid brings the Iranian issue to Netanyahu in an excellent shape. I think whatever he needs to do now is whatever he's doing the best, lecture and speak. We will hear a lot of speeches with his people in the last weeks. He said, this is the most important issue, and I will talk and deal with it. But right now we don't have anything to do. The White House is asleep. The Iranians are not in the negotiation. The Europeans have worse problems to deal with. The Russians the same. So the question is, what will happen if the negotiations will resume? Then the original Netanyahu would go to a jihad against the White House, metaphorically, of course, with all the speeches and going to Congress. But this is the original Netanyahu. The current Netanyahu, I am not sure he will want to damage the very fragile relationship with the White House when he is managing such a government like what we're going to see within a few weeks. So maybe he will give President Biden a break, especially when he knows that an agreement or not an agreement is not very important. On the bottom line, a new agreement to Israeli national security is not so terrible, as Andrew, we both know.
Ben, a question on how Netanyahu return to the prime ministership would impact the maritime agreement with Lebanon, which was brokered by the United States. During the campaign, Netanyahu was critical of the deal as not in the best interest of Israel. But again, you wrote this week for Monitor that, like the Iran policy probably not much change with regard to the agreement with Lebanon.
Naftali Bennett, he was not a prime minister when this agreement was signed, but he was negotiating it for a year. He criticized a few points in this agreement, but on the bottom line, he was a member of government, the alternate prime minister. He voted in favor of the government, and he told someone today that Netanyahu will not touch this agreement even with a very long stick, because Netanyahu is smart, maybe the smartest politician we ever saw in Israel. He knows all the advantages of this deal. He knows the goods that Israel got from this deal, and also he knows what we paid, and we paid a price, but the price we paid is in salt water and in a gas well that was not found yet. And we will have our percentage in this natural gas well, the Kana well, if it will be found. Right now, it's only estimations. And Netanyahu, even before this deal was signed and he was shouting and screaming about it, first he said, when we come back to power, we will cancel it. And then, even before elections, he stopped saying canceling it. He said, I will deal with it like I dealt with all the agreements that I met in the past. So guess what? Let's start counting the agreements he met in the past. He met the Oslo agreements. He promised everyone to cancel the Oslo agreements. He was elected prime minister and he confirmed the agreements. He brought back Hebron to Arafat. And then he went to Y Plantation and signed letting Arafat another 13% of the West Bank. So this is how he dealt in Oslo, with Oslo. Then we had the disengagement from Gaza and north of Samaria, and he voted in favor of it. And when he came to power, he did not cancel it until right now. So don't be worried. The maritime agreement, as I think a Lebanese official, maybe the prime minister, the president, someone said in the last few days, don't worry, this agreement is here to stay, and it brings stability to everyone. It's a very good agreement.
Ben, what are the implications of Netanyahu's return for the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, or I should say Israeli-Palestinian relations? We have the situation in the West Bank, which has been quite violent in recent months. What changes do you expect, if any?
If you want to find this process, you need a nuclear telescope, but the process is not there anymore, but the relationship are there, and the security cooperation is there. And the sides, until a few days ago, the Palestinians were in good connection with the Israeli military, with Benny Gantz, even with the Yair Lapid guys. But this government is very, very bad news to everyone who lives in the West Bank, that we call Judea and Samaria, and the Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, and I think to all the Middle East. I think we will hear in the next few days or weeks, we'll hear all the players. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi said today that there is no alternative to a two-state solution, and don't forget that Netanyahu, that had the Bar Ilan speech in 2009. At first time, the leader of the right wing in Israel confirmed his support to the two-state solution, then negotiated with Arafat, and then negotiated again with Abu Mazen in London, and with the Minister Kerry and Ambassador Indik, etc., etc. Netanyahu is no longer there. So there is no process. Right now, the process is on very, very low scale, and I think it will die. But it's not only a peace process. His new partners, especially the alliance of the Jewish Zionists, they will demand confirming and approving immediately what they call the young settlements. The young settlements is illegal settlements, dozens of, a few of them exist for 25 and 30 years, but you know it's a system that you build, and but everything is against the law, And if you do it, I expect a lot of trouble. You have the Eviatar. This is the newest settlement that was built not long ago, and it was supposed to be evacuated, but because of election and the fragile state of the Bennett government, it was not done. The American administration until now gave the government peace and quiet in this issue because they wanted the government to survive. They knew that if Naftali Bennett will start evacuating settlements, he will fall. Now they will not have this reason anymore. But more than this, we touched it a few minutes ago. Praying on Temple Mount. The status quo on Temple Mount is that the Muslims pray there, the Jews pray down in the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. Jewish pilgrims are allowed to go in, not big numbers. The numbers are going up all the time, but it's a few thousands, but not pray. 1.5 years ago, on the last days of Netanyahu as a prime minister, he said in a speech that he stopped Itamar Ben-Gvir for going up Temple Mount and praying because, in Netanyahu's word, Ben-Gvir wanted to ignite the whole Middle East. Now he will not be able to stop him. And if you will start seeing Jews praying aloud, Supreme Court, by the way, approved praying quietly in your heart. But if you'll start see this, then open CNN and look at the flames. But it's only examples that I give. It's a very right wing. I'm talking about letting the IDF shoot a lot easier than they do right now. And they're very, very cautious. After all, we're saying the IDF is a very contained, and we try to as little as violence as possible. It's not always possible, but you'll see total different policy. And let's all pray that it will not take us to a very bad place. By the way, personally, I'm not so worried and not so disappointed, because I tell myself maybe this is the time to let the extreme right do what he thinks that we need to do, in order that in the future they will not say all the time, we have this slogan in Israel, let the IDF win. No one knows that there are limits to the power, to the strength. And now let them try. Netanyahu was always be able to blame someone. Listen, I did not do this and this because Barak was in my government. Tzipi Livni was. Now we will not be able to blame anyone. And I think maybe it's time to try the right-wing way and hope to survive.
Ben, what do you expect to see in terms of friction, if any, in U.S.-Israel relations? Obviously, Netanyahu played the partisan card because of the Iran nuclear deal under President Obama. He seems to have a good relationship with President Biden. Do you expect friction, or do you believe he'll look to keep a steady relationship with the White House?
If anyone can keep some normalization between the White House and the Prime Minister's chambers in Jerusalem in the current situation, it's Netanyahu. He can outmaneuver anyone. But I think this situation is bigger on him as well. He's really surrounded with people that I read and hear that the Americans already announced that they will not work with Itamar Ben-Gvir. And I think Bezalel Smotrich is more extreme than Ben-Gvir, and all the others are extremists or really very ultra-religious. And Netanyahu will have to be in his total best in order to appease Biden. By the way, I don't think that there is a lot of love between these two guys. Although when Biden visited Israel, he shook his hand and said, Bibi, I love you. And they really know each other for, I think, 20 or 30 years. But if you ask Biden who he prefers in prime minister office, it's Yair Lapid, it's Naftali Bennett, it's anyone. even in the right Israeli wing, but not Netanyahu. He also knows the Netanyahu ability to speak to the American public, to speak to the Democrats, to try and interfere between American parties. And these, I think, the news, if we count this Israeli election, it's bad news for whom. I think the White House is one of the first places.
Ben, we're almost out of time, but lots of good questions left. Maybe a couple of let me give you three quick questions because they're all good ones. What role could President Herzog play, if any? Would he try to use his trusted public position to sway Netanyahu for a more inclusive government? Number two, what happened to the Labor Party? You touched on this earlier. Now it's one of the smallest parties in the Knesset after what seemed like a mini resurgence in the last round. And what about Avigdor Lieberman and his party? He seemed like one of the key players, the Israel Betkenu party. Are they still popular? And what's the issue between him and Netanyahu besides the personal friction?
Let's start with President Herzog. He already said before the election that he will try to help the parties form a unity government. And President Herzog is popular, and he really wants to do it. But I think he knows, I know he knows that it's impossible. He will try to work publicly to try to ease tensions between the public, the Bibi supporters, the left-wingers, the settlers, the Orthodox. We have so many tribes in Israel. His hands will be full, but I see the chances to do the big thing, to convince Gantz, Lapid, and Netanyahu to forget everything, to restart everything, and try to form a government without sectorial parties. The chances are zero. The name you have to watch, you didn't mention it, but I will. It's Aryeh Deri, the veteran leader of Shas, 2 times convicted felon, but in Israel, it's you can survive this also. But he is a very pragmatic person. He sat in many cabinets, and I heard from all the heads and the commanders of the of the Israeli security forces all the time that he is cautious, intelligent, pragmatic, not running into war. He's a very important guy in cabinet and also in politics. I think he will take Itamar Ben-Gvir, although they are from different parties, and he will be Ben-Gvir's mentor, and he will try to calm him. And he's the hope for us not to go to any adventures. I'm talking about security issues, of course. Talking about labor, it's not new. Labor is the party that established the state of Israel, but I think the historical role is over. Merav Michaeli took this party behind the voter threshold in polls before the last election. The party was not existing. A miracle happened, and she got 7 mandates. Now she got 5, and she's going to speak 90 minutes from now. And from labor history, I don't bet on her chances of survival, because Likud had in all the history of Israel, I think 4 leaders: Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, Benjamin Netanyahu, Ariel Sharon, Ehud Olmert was Kadima. 4 or 5 leaders. Labor had maybe 20. So I think Merav Michaeli's role is over, and Labor, I think, needs to invent itself from the beginning, join forces with Meretz that was wiped out of the map, but still they got 3.5 mandates, and form something that I call the Israeli Democratic Party. I will be very happy if it will happen with the Yair Lapid, and then we will have a big Israeli Democratic Party. Talking about Benny Gantz, but Gantz's guys like Saar and Elkin are 2 rightists for this party. Last and least is Avigdor Lieberman. He is the inventor of all this process, because in the first election out of 5 in 2019, He got 5 mandates, and the Netanyahu bloc got 65, and we all expected a very easy government. And then he announced that he's not sitting with Netanyahu anymore. And we launched all these lunatic process of 5 consecutive campaigns. Right now, Lieberman was blowed. His mythological adversary, Aryeh Deri, won by 11 mandates, I think. And Lieberman was almost out, then 4, then now I think 5 or 6 mandates. It's not so bad, but he became irrelevant. He tried to declare himself as liberal, pragmatic right, but there is not enough space right now in the current atmosphere in Israel with all this terror in the streets, not enough base for Lieberman to flourish. I don't think that like Merav Michaeli is finished. I think he's a player. He was a very good minister of finance. He got the office with the huge deficit of 10%, and he lets it to Netanyahu with 0%, with 0 deficit. So he's a player, but it's not a good time for Lieberman.
And Ben, just one more quick question on the process. If you could tell us in 30 seconds what we can expect now. You said Lapid is expected to make the call this evening. Then what happens? Herzog asked Netanyahu to form a government, and he has 3 weeks to do so.
Lapid will congratulate this evening Netanyahu, but this is not a part of the process. You can congratulate and you cannot. After the formal results will be declared and written in the statute of Israel, all the leaders of the parties will go to Herzog, and every party will recommend the name that they think will be the prime minister. Netanyahu will get 65 recommendations. Herzog will give him the mandate to form a government. He has 28 days to do so, and if he is not succeeding, he can get 14 days more. I think that this time, we always say it will be very easy, and it is always not very easy. I think this time it can be easy. But the worst case scenario is that he will get 14 days more, and between 28 or 42 days from the moment he gets the mandate, you will see a new government in Israel sworn in, and start praying for Israel.
Ben, thank you for this analysis, for this time with us and our viewers today, for your many contributions to Al Monitor. Reminder to our viewers, you can read Ben Caspit twice a week in English at Al Monitor. And then if you're not reading Ben Caspit, you should be reading Ben Caspit, because he always has the scoop and the hottest analysis on what's happening. And stay tuned to Al Monitor, more webinars coming, including from Ben via Al Monitor Pro on what's happening in Israel, and continue to tune into almonitor.com for the news and trends in the region, and Al Monitor Pro for cutting edge analysis and programs like this one. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrew.